I'm here to speak about Mary Hinkson, one of tonight's recipients of the Martha Hill Lifetime Achievement Awards. I know that we are all sad that Mary can't be here tonight. I'm getting choked up about it. But I know she's here in spirit, and I know that she will roll her eyes a couple of times as I expound on how wonderful she is.
She is.
She is. You hear that, Mary? You are. I've known Mary for most of my life. She's been my teacher, my mentor, my friend, a second mother to me. She's been an employer, and she's been an inspiration to me in more ways than I can count. I met Mary through my dear friend Jenny. Where is Jenny? Mary's daughter, who is here tonight with many family and friends, including her daughter, Elsa, who is Mary's granddaughter. And Elsa will be accepting the award tonight for Mary. Jenny and I were 12 years old, and we were blatantly ignoring our 7th grade math teacher and getting to know one another during class time. And we covered what our fathers did. And then she asked me, well, what does your mother do? I didn't know what to say. I said, well, she takes care of me. And Jenny just nodded appreciatively and said, oh, she's a housewife. And now I'm mystified and curious, and I say, well, what does your mother do? And she says, she's a lead dancer with the Martha Graham Dance Company. My jaw dropped, and I lost my breath for several minutes because I knew all about Martha Graham and her fantastic dancers. My teacher talked about them all the time, my dance teacher, Evelyn de la Tour. Well, Jenny and I became close friends, and Mary and her husband Julian, Jenny's father, became like a second family to me. And Jenny and I took classes at the Graham School, and Mary would drive us back and forth, ferrying us on the FDR, and she drove like a race car driver. And I felt like being in the car with Mary was just like watching her dance. Absolutely thrilling. I think it's a wonderful full circle that we're all here tonight at the Martha Hill Awards. Because it was Martha Hill who said to Mary, you must not leave New York or be in New York without studying with Martha Graham. And I heard recently that at the time, Mary didn't know who Martha was. Martha Graham, that is. She confessed that. But Mary was here because she had a fellowship at NYU under Martha Hill. And when she went back to her college, the University of Wisconsin, she and her friend Matt Turney saw the Graham Company perform when they came to visit, and they were completely blown away by the dancers, by the movement, and by Martha Graham herself. So they were determined to come to New York City, and they did, and it was Martha Hill who sent them to the Graham School. And at this time, Mary's parents were a little unsure of her choice of a career because it was very impractical, but they were supportive nonetheless. So after studying at the Graham School, Mary and Matt did a demonstration for the dance critic Walter Terry under Martha Graham's instructions. And after that, they were asked to join the company by Martha Graham herself. They were the first African-American dancers to join the Martha Graham Dance Company. And I asked Mary recently if she had ever felt discriminated against inside the company or by Graham herself. Mary laughed her wonderful laugh, and she said, no, nothing mattered to Martha but how you moved. You could be bright purple with pink polka dots, and if she liked the way you moved, that was it. Didn't matter a bit. How many of you here tonight had the good fortune to see Mary perform? If you did, you know that her musicality, her energy, emotion, power, and beauty are unparalleled and pretty difficult to put into words. The choreographer Alonzo King says it well. Her performance in Deaths and Entrances was life-changing. I am still stunned by the beauty and power of her presence and artistic mastery. She is one of the most amazing and beautiful dancers that ever existed. Mary, along with Sally Grobner and Eugene Lester, had worked on the reconstruction of Deaths and Entrances, Graham's masterpiece about the Bronte sisters. And it was one of Mary's favorite roles. Graham also created several roles for Mary, such as in Praise of Earth in Canticle for Innocent Comedians, and the title role of Circe that Graham had initially planned for herself. She trusted Mary to be one of the first dancers to take over roles that only Graham had performed, such as the title role of Clytemnestra, Graham's riveting, frightening, and heartbreaking full evening work. Mary was so powerful in the role of Clytemnestra that when Jenny and Julian and I went backstage after seeing her perform, Mary reached over to hug Jenny, and Jenny stepped back and said, "Wait a minute, I'm still scared of you." Jenny and I, along with Julian, attended every performance that Mary danced during her last season with the Graham Company. I will treasure forever seeing Mary as Medea in Cave of the Heart, another one of Mary's favorite roles. And I will also remember forever how she melted our hearts and lifted our spirits up with her portrayal of Joan becoming Saint Joan in Seraphic Dialogue. Mary performed with many other dance world giants originating roles, and she tells a funny story about how she came to work with the New York City Opera and John Butler for Giancarlo Menotti's Amal and the Night Visitors. Glenn Tetley, who was a principal dancer with the opera, had seen Canticle for Innocent Comedians, and he loved Matt Turney's performance. But he thought her name was Mary Hinkson. And he suggested that John Butler call her into audition. Butler loved Mary's dancing so much that he choreographed the peasant scene on her right there at the audition. Tetley never said a word. Butler never knew. It was meant to be. And Tetley and Mary became very close friends. Mary says that when her parents saw her in Amal and the Night Visitors on TV, they thought that her career might work out after all. Mary appeared in other operas choreographed by Butler, including Carmina Burana and Bluebird's Castle. She partnered Alvin Ailey in Harry Belafonte's touring revue, Sing Man Sing, and Mary created the female role in Donald McKayle's classic Rainbow Round My Shoulder. In 1960, George Balanchine created roles in the ballet Figure in the Carpet for Mary and her good friend Arthur Mitchell at New York City Ballet. Mary tells me that Mitchell had called her and said, "Get here right away to audition for Balanchine." Mary said she couldn't because she and Julian were drinking champagne. And Mitchell said, "It doesn't matter, get down here anyway." Mary, of course, completely wowed Balanchine, champagne or not. Mitchell was the first African-American man to join NYCB, and Mary was the first African-American woman to perform with the company. She also performed with Glenn Tetley's company, originating roles in several works, including The Seven Deadly Sins and Dithrone. Tetley choreographed his pas de deux. I looked this one up, and I knew how to pronounce it earlier in the evening, but I've forgotten now. It's a musical thing. Ricciocare, Scott? Ricciocare?
Yeah, sounds good.
Ricciocare, sounds good. Okay, Ricciocare on Mary and also on Scott Douglas, and it premiered with American Ballet Theatre. Mary also worked with Walter Nix, and she said she enjoyed all the choreographers with whom she worked, with the exception of one, but she won't say who that is. Mary's television appearances include Look Up and Live, Lamp Unto My Feet, Omnibus, as well as the NBC telecast of Amal and the Night Visitors. Mary broke through race barriers, and she illuminated all the stages and performance mediums she entered with her presence, prodigious talent, and star qualities. And how many of you were lucky enough to have Mary as a teacher or a coach? Yeah. in her class was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. She created a magical atmosphere just by demonstrating the simplest moves. One felt transported by her grace and artistry and inspired to search for that in oneself. She used her great sense of humor to wonderful effect, sometimes demonstrating the way not to do the movement. That would cause ripples of laughter to course through the room, and later on, it would cause Mary to have to get some extra Bengay or Tiger Balm out. Mary encouraged every student to find his or her way organically to absorb the movement, not to just copy it. She paid attention to everyone in class, no matter what skill level or potential was evident, and no matter what the person looked like. When I was obsessed with having the perfect dancer's body and semi-starving myself, Mary said to me something one of her teachers said. I think it was Margaret Dobler. It's not beautiful bodies dancing. It's bodies dancing beautifully. Mary also worked so well with the accompanists in her classes because of her great love of music. I think it can be said that quite a few of them learned as much from Mary as the dance students did. You could see how inspired they were by her as she danced the simple demonstration. It became a pas de trois between her, the musician, and the music. And one of them is here tonight, Scott Killian. In the early 70s, Mary and her dear friend and fellow Graham dancer Bertram Ross, as co-artistic directors of the Graham Company, were instrumental, along with Leroy Leatherman, in creating an apprentice program to teach young dancers some of the works in the Graham repertory for studio performances and to keep the repertory going. Graham had been ill and absent from the company and the studio for some time, and Mary and Bertram knew that the company needed to do something active to stay alive. Jenny and I loved watching the rehearsals and performances. To watch Mary teaching a very young Janet Elber and Peggy Lyman the role of the woman in white in Graham's magnificent diversion of Angels is something I will never forget. Mary was able to transfer many of the original qualities to Janet and Peggy so that new generations of viewers could appreciate the central role in one of Graham's most joyous works. Mary performed Diversion of Angels at the White House during the Johnson administration, and there is a photograph of the whole cast along with Lady Bird Johnson and President Lyndon Johnson, and Martha is holding Mary's hand, and Mary has this beautiful smile on her face and she's all aglow, but she told Jenny and me that Martha was crushing her hand and digging her fingernails into Mary's palm with a bad case of nerves, and Mary said she wanted to scream. But there she is in the photograph, beautiful, a true professional. When Mary left the Graham Company and branched out into teaching all over the world, I followed her wherever and whenever I could. Her classes at the Summer Dance Academy in Cologne, Germany were always filled to capacity with dancers of all types from all over the world. It was wonderful to watch her transcend any language obstacles with the international tongue of dance, as well as funny to hear her make fun of her own attempts at German. In France, she loved adding to her knowledge of French while teaching her classes. I remember her laughing her head off in class when a student informed her that the word she was using for relax meant something entirely different, something more along the lines of a bathroom activity. She promptly had the student teach her the correct word and never forgot it. And I just want to add that Mark was one of those students of Mary's at the Dance Academy in Cologne, and reminded me that Mary would sit up on the table to teach so that everyone could see her, and she needed to be up there, elevated. It was perfect. Mary's teaching list is really extensive. Juilliard, the High School of Performing Arts, the Alvin Ailey American Dance Center, and the Dance Theater of Harlem, to name a few. In 1967, she was sent by Martha Graham to England to introduce the Graham technique to dancers there. She taught contemporary techniques to many companies, including the Stuttgart Ballet, the Royal Danish Ballet, the Dance Theatre of Harlem, and the Joffrey Ballet. She has coached the members of the Martha Graham Company and has worked with Philadanco, inspiring a whole new generation of dancers. But how many of you knew that Mary was also the owner of one of New York's finest Italian bread bakeries? Mary kept D&G going as a loving tribute to her husband Julian, who left this planet way too soon. It had been Julian's dream to keep this treasured place going when the original owner moved back to Italy. He succeeded in saving it and made it wildly successful. And Mary kept it going for 15 years after he passed with the help of Jenny and her cousin Beverly, as well as more than a few of the folks in this room. Mary and Jenny even gave me a job selling bread there. Mary teaches through example. Her devotion and strength through adversity and her willingness to take on something entirely out of her own field and do it well are truly remarkable. There's so much more I'd like to say about Mary, and I'm sure you can tell how much I love and admire her. But there's one more thing I must say. There's another role of which Mary is very proud, and it is supremely important to her. And that is being the mother of Jenny and the grandmother of Elsa and Jeremy, as well as being part of a loving and supported family of sister, cousins, nieces, and nephews. Here to accept the Martha Hill Lifetime Achievement Award for her grandmother is Elsa Hardy, a graduate.
Well, I've already cried twice tonight, so I'm going to try and keep it at that. Thank you so much, Laura. I know it would mean the world to my grandmother to hear those thoughtful and beautiful words that you shared with us tonight. And on my grandmother's behalf,